Thanks to Supremacy World War III for sponsoring this video. If you've ever wondered what it's like to lead a real nation through the chaos of World War III, now's your chance. Supremacy World War III is a free online PvP strategy game that throws you into the heart of modern global conflict. You'll take control of a real-world country, manage its economy, develop advanced military tech, and lead your forces in real-time battles that unfold over days or even weeks. What I love most is how deep the strategy goes. It's not just about firepower. You'll be forming alliances, negotiating with real players, and choosing whether to dominate through brute force or outmaneuver your rivals with diplomacy. And with Season 19, Fractured Domination, the stakes have never been higher. This season introduces a massive world map with strategic control points that supply critical resources like warheads and munitions. You'll also unlock powerful elite units and test out the new officers system, where unique commanders can permanently boost your army's performance, and you can play on desktop or mobile with one account, so the war goes wherever you go. But here's the best part. New players who sign up using the link below will get an exclusive starter pack, including a free seasonal unit, the Elite Railgun, valued at $40. It's only available for the next 30 days, so don't wait to take command. Dawn arrives with the thunder of mortars. The SAS soldiers jolt awake. Through the monsoon mist, shadows emerge, a swarm of heavily armed communist guerrillas, charging their small fort. Radios crackle with panicked calls, ammunition is running low, air support grounded by the weather. It's 9 men against hundreds. By every military calculation, they're already dead. But these SAS soldiers have different ideas. In 1965, Oman was rocked by a rebellion. The Dhofar Liberation Front started as a tribal uprising against Sultan Sayyid bin Taimur, who ruled Oman like it was the Dark Ages. He'd outlawed education, banned modern technology, and kept his people in crushing poverty, even as oil wealth poured into the country. The man literally forbade his subjects from wearing sunglasses or playing soccer. But by 1968, something dangerous happened. The rebellion went communist, and soon things picked up steam. The Sultan started losing badly. The country was coming apart, entire regions were wrestled from government control, and the insurgency spread across the region like wildfire. There was only one thing for it. In 1970, the Sultan's own son Qaboos staged a coup. The old tyrant was out. The new Sultan immediately reversed his father's insane policies. He reopened schools, he built hospitals, but there was still an insurgency to crush, and he made a crucial decision. He picked up the phone and he made a very important phone call. He invited the British SAS to help fight the rebellion. As an ex-imperial power, the Brits already had a preferred strategy in mind when they agreed to send a deployment of SAS troops to Oman. The hearts and minds approach they proposed, however, wasn't anything like what the Sultan's son expected. Instead of just killing off the rebels, the British reasoned that they could win over the local population, just like they had done in Malaya and Kenya during similar uprisings. Continue with the medical care, the infrastructure, the building projects, and they could even recruit former rebels into loyal Furquat units, thereby turning enemies into allies who knew the terrain and, crucially, the tactics. And they needed every advantage they could get. Defeat in Dhofar wouldn't just topple a government, it would change the balance of power across the entire region. There was a lot riding on this rebellion. In 1970, over 60% of Europe's oil supply passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Whoever controlled Oman controlled the strait, and that made this remote province worth dying for. The province of Dhofar sits in southern Oman, separated from the rest of the country by hundreds of miles of arid desert. It has a narrow, fertile coastal plain where the towns cling to the sea, and behind those towns rise the Jebel Dhofar, rugged mountains that climb to 6,900 feet and remain shrouded in monsoon clouds for half the year. These mountains, the Jebel Qamar in the west, the Jebel Qara in the center, and the Jebel Samhan in the east, were destined to become the battlefield in the showdown. In October 1971, the SAS led a major offensive in Oman called Operation Jaguar. The aim was to take back the mountains and establish a base there. The main squadron would push in from the north, while a small unit would attack from the east. And despite being under constant sniper fire, the government forces managed to establish positions on the Jebel Ali, a hill about 3,300 feet north of Mirbat, a coastal town in the southwest of the country. After enduring 40 attacks over 4 days, they held the position and the rebels couldn't dislodge them. And the rebels were ready for it. They weren't a ragtag band anymore, they'd become a fully armed, foreign-backed insurgent army. The rebel group renamed itself the Popular Front for the Liberation of the Occupied Arabian Gulf, or PFLOAG. Marxist-Leninist ideology replaced tribal grievances, and suddenly the superpowers took notice. The Soviet Union, China, Cuba, and Iraq began funneling weapons across the border from the newly communist South Yemen. AK-47s, RPG launchers, heavy machine guns, 82mm mortars, even Katyusha rockets, all flowing to the Adu guerrillas in bountiful abundance. Training camps sprouted along the border too. By 1970, the Communists controlled the entire Jebel, which meant that between 2,000 and 3,000 battle-hardened guerrillas suddenly owned the mountains. As for the Sultan's government, well, it was pretty shabby. 1,000 poorly equipped soldiers with World War II vintage bolt-action rifles fighting an enemy with modern automatic weapons. The Sultan's forces couldn't even operate in groups smaller than company strength, which made them slow, clumsy, and utterly predictable. This was the situation the SAS walked into: a collapsing state, an enemy overflowing with foreign weapons, and a landscape built for ambushes. And this was a problem for the Adu attackers. They were losing momentum and they desperately needed a victory. A dramatic one at that, one that could prove that they could still strike government forces with impunity, anywhere, anytime. So the rebels retooled their attack plans and chose a new target: Mirbat. The town sat roughly 80 kilometers east of Salalah, the provincial capital. Most importantly, it wasn't heavily defended, with just 9 British SAS soldiers, 55 Omani and Askari troops, and about 60 Firkat militia guarding the position. And its strategic value was immense. Mirbat controlled the maritime infiltration routes from South Yemen, protecting the eastern flank of the coastal plain. Most importantly, it housed Firkat families, former rebels who were in the process of or already switching sides. Taking Mirbat would cut the coast in half, terrify the Firkats back into submission, and prove the government could not protect those who allied with them. And the Adu rebels began planning their assault. They'd strike at dawn during the monsoon season, when thick mist would blind the defenders, and ground the Sultan's aircraft. They'd attack with overwhelming force, with about 400 fighters armed to the teeth with the latest and greatest Soviet weaponry money could buy. Against 9 SAS soldiers in a tiny fort, armed with rifles and 1 ancient artillery piece, it should have been a massacre. The thing is, this time the Adu just happened to pick the wrong 9 men to mess with. This SAS unit was led by a hardened 27-year-old named Captain Mike Keeley. Keeley was born on May 29, 1945, and commissioned in the British Army through Sandhurst, Britain's elite officer academy. He passed SAS selection, one of the world's most grueling military courses, and earned his place in B Squadron. But he was still a young officer commanding his first major operation. As for leading men in combat, this was to be his baptism by fire. Keeley was stubborn by design, a trait that qualified him to lead remote missions in desolate places. It would also be his undoing. Several years later, during a 1979 training exercise in the Brecon Beacons, Keeley would refuse warm clothing and throw away a rescue blanket, his stubbornness and hypothermia clouding his judgment, leading to his death at just 33 years old. In about 12 hours, Captain Keeley would have to make split-second decisions that would determine whether his men lived or died. Sergeant Talayasi Laba, who everyone called Laba, would also become a legend in Oman. Born in 1942 in Fiji, Laba was one of the 212 Fijians recruited into the British Army in 1961. He joined the Royal Ulster Rifles, then in 1966 passed SAS selection and also joined B Squadron, where he earned a reputation as one of the regiment's most respected soldiers. And impressively, he'd already proven himself. In Borneo, he'd led successful ambushes against Indonesian infiltrators. In Aden, he worked undercover ops under constant threat of exposure, where his calmness and accurate fire in combat situations earned him the British Empire Medal. But it was Laba's physical presence that people remember. His comrades dubbed him the Gentle Giant, the kind of man who could even attempt to operate a 6-man artillery piece alone. More than size, though, it was his character. Unshakable, the kind of soldier who makes everyone around him believe they can win, even when the odds say otherwise. Laba had a fellow Fijian in the regiment, Trooper Sekonaya Tak Takavesi. Decades later, he recalled their native bond. "We were blood brothers," he said. "We stood side by side." And it was true. The night before the battle, they had some rum to celebrate what was supposed to be the last day of their 5-month tour in Mirbat. They had packed their belongings along with the other comrades, including Trooper Tommy Tobin, the team medic, Sergeant Bob Bennett, Corporal Roger Cole, Corporal Jeff Taylor, Lance Corporal Pete Snapper Warren, and Trooper Austin Fuzz Hussey. The handover was scheduled and they were all going home. Just before dawn, their plans abruptly changed. The SAS team awoke to the thunder of incoming mortars as the picket post at Jebel Ali came under attack. The Dhofar Gendarmerie section manning the position never stood a chance. Adu guerrillas with knives made quick work of the sleeping militiamen, though one managed to fire a warning shot before his throat was slashed. And that single shot may have saved Mirbat. Inside the British Army Training Team, or Bat House, the small fortified headquarters where the 9-man SAS team lived and operated, the soldiers jolted awake. Captain Keeley rushed to assess the situation. Through the pre-dawn darkness and monsoon mist, he could see shapes surging forward, lots of them. His first thought was that it was the night picket patrol returning early. Then, the mortars started landing closer. A volley of RPGs and artillery shells signaled the main attack. The realization hit Keeley like ice water. The night picket was dead, and those weren't friendlies. What he was seeing was actually 400 Adu guerrillas, armed with freshly oiled AK-47s, RPGs, heavy machine guns, mortars, and rockets. Keeley didn't even bother doing the math. Instead, his voice cut through the chaos as he yelled at the others, rapidly arming themselves to open fire. The team had scrambled to their defensive positions behind sandbag parapets that they had built on the Bat House roof. From this elevated and fortified position, they opened up with their L1A1 SLR battle rifles, semi-automatic workhorses that fire 7.62mm NATO rounds. One trooper slung his Browning into .50 caliber heavy machine gun into action, its massive 12.7mm rounds capable of tearing human beings in half. On the ground level, Trooper Hussey began frantically lobbing mortars toward the advancing waves. The Adu fired back with everything they had. Their AK-47s, automatic and spitting 600 rounds per minute, laid down waves of suppressive fire. The SLRs effectively outranged the AKs by about 100 yards, but none of that mattered here. The Adu weren't staying at a distance, they were charging. Barefooted guerrillas breached the perimeter wire on the north and northeast as the assault gained momentum. The Adu hoped to overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers, and for a second it looked like it might work. Captain Keeley ordered the radio operator to get into contact with SAS HQ at al-Qwarif. With only a small contingent of Omani intelligence service personnel and a handful of Pakistani soldiers at the Bat House, he told them they needed immediate reinforcements. Then his eyes shifted northeast toward the fort, 2,000 feet away. That was where the real problem was developing. The soldiers' 25-pounder artillery gun sat in an exposed put next to the smaller Omani fort. It was the only heavy weapon capable of reaching the advancing Adu masses, but the Omani gunner who had been manning it was now seriously wounded. Laba saw the same thing Keeley did. The SLRs wouldn't be fully effective until the Adu closed to within a few hundred yards. They needed that gun firing, and they needed it now. Without a word, Laba grabbed his rifle and sprung into action, sprinting through the maelstrom toward the artillery position. This Fijian giant, all muscle and determination, covered the open ground in a flash. Mortar rounds erupted around him, RPGs were streaking past in orange flashes, and Laba just kept running. He reached the gun pit and instantly took stock of the situation. The wounded Omani gunner was in bad shape. The ancient World War II artillery piece now sat silent. Ordinarily, it took about 6 men to operate the 25-pounder. One man would stand behind the gun and call orders, usually the easiest job on the crew. Another would load the high-explosive shells. A third handled the aiming mechanism. The remaining crew prepared ammunition and fuses, keeping the next rounds ready to fire. But Laba was built differently, and that's because he did it all himself, firing 1 round per minute. One man doing a 6-man job. Load, aim, fire, repeat. Each shell screamed downrange and detonated among the advancing guerrillas. Adu fighters charging the barbed wire were blasted into oblivion. The psychological effect was immediate. Suddenly, the attackers had to deal with artillery raining down on them, not just small arms fire. But Laba was exposed. A radio message crackled through to Keeley. Laba told him a bullet had skimmed his face, and he was badly injured, and he was struggling to operate the gun alone. Blood was streaming down his face, and he was hit pretty bad, but he kept on firing. Keeley faced an impossible decision. He could either stay in the cover of the Bat House and coordinate the defense from there, or he could abandon his command post to help Laba. He looked at his men and asked for a volunteer. Tak didn't hesitate. The air was filled with machine gun fire, mortars, and RPGs, and Tak just sprinted straight through it all with the help of supporting fire from the roof of the Bat House. He dove into the pit next to Laba. His friend was in bad shape, blood everywhere, face torn partially open by the bullet wound to his chin. But Laba was grinning, still firing and fighting through it all. Together, they kept the gun going. Knowing that they would need more help, Tak returned to the door of the fort and tried to rouse the Omani soldiers. One gunner, Walid Khamis, emerged as both men raced to the pit. It was to little avail. Clearing sandbags from the position, the Omani gunner fell forward into the gun pit, hit in the stomach by a bullet. The Adu were close now, terrifyingly close. The guerrillas advanced so near that Laba and Tak fired the 25-pounder at point-blank range, aiming down the barrel like a rifle. Tak was hit, But he, like Laba, had enough to keep fighting. Between the artillery rounds, they grabbed their SLRs and fired into the massive advancing fighters. Still, they came. Rockets slammed into the fort. The perimeter wire was breached. The main breakthrough was developing directly in front of the fort. The Gadu were advancing on the gun pit in large numbers. Then Laba made a move for a small 60mm mortar nearby, still trying to bring more firepower to bear. And then a bullet hit him in the neck. He fell dead. Back at the Bat House, communication with the gun pit was lost. Keeley grabbed the radio and contacted al-Qurayf again to reiterate that they desperately needed air cover, a helicopter to evacuate Laba, and more ammunition if this firefight continued at its current rate. Keeley had a decision to make. He grabbed Tommy Tobin, the team medic, and said they were going to help. As they approached the gun pit, the fighting intensified. Both men sprinted for cover. Tobin dove into the gun pit. Keeley slid into the sandbagged ammunition bay. The scene inside the pit was hell. Laba lay face down and very still. Tak sat propped up against the sandbags with his SLR, shot through the back but still fighting. Walid Khamis was down, blood pooled in the sand beneath him. Adu fighters began lobbing grenades. They bounced off the lip of the gun pit before exploding. Shrapnel tore through the air, and Adu appeared at the edge and Keeley cut him down with a burst from his SLR. Tobin worked frantically on the wounded Omani gunner, setting up an IV drip even as bullets cracked overhead. He then reached over to Laba's body, trying desperately to help. A bullet struck Tobin in his face and he went down, mortally wounded. 2 men down in seconds. Keeley crouched with Tak in the ammunition bay and must have thought that this was it. This is how it ends. Then he heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Jet engines. BAC Strikemaster light attack jets from the Sultan of Oman's Air Force screamed overhead and began their strafing runs. The British-made trainer attack aircraft were the cavalry arriving at the last possible moment. The low cloud base from the monsoon forced low-altitude attacks, limiting the aircraft to machine gun and light rockets. But it was enough. One Strikemaster took damage from the rebels and had to limp back to base, but the others kept coming. Rockets slammed into the Adu positions as cannon fire raked the guerrilla formations. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted. And then, through the smoke and the chaos, Keeley heard rotors. G Squadron's relief force touched down south of Mirbat in 3 helicopters. 22 fresh SAS operators loaded for war immediately dismounted and made contact with an Adu rear guard of 4 fighters cornered in a cave. Law rockets slammed into the cave entrance, followed by sustained machine gun fire. Problem solved. The Adu, caught between the relief force, airstrikes, and the still fighting defenders, began to break at once. By 12:30 p.m., the PFL-OAG assault force had been soundly defeated. It had taken 6.5 hours of near-continuous combat before they withdrew. 6.5 hours of impossible odds. Helicopters began extracting the wounded, though several had taken hits. Tobin and the Omani gunner were casevaced on the first available flight. Keeley crawled forward to check the gun pit. Tak sat listless against the sandbags, his whole body covered with blood, but he smiled. After the battle, they counted the cost. 2 SAS dead, Laba and Tobin, several wounded, including Tak and Walid Khamis, and 38 confirmed Adu bodies recovered on the battlefield. Estimates suggested upwards of 200 total casualties. Tobin died in the hospital from an infection in his lung caused by a splintered tooth that he had inhaled when his jaw was blown off. He never received official British recognition for his sacrifice. As for Laba, he died a hero. One man operating a 6-man artillery piece. One man who somehow survived an 800-yard dash through concentrated machine gun fire. He, like his peers, epitomized the SAS spirit. The Adu had attacked with overwhelming force, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had been shattered. The failure to capture Mirbat demonstrated the Adu's inability to take defended positions. The rebellion never recovered its momentum. 9 SAS soldiers and a handful of local troops had held the line. Thanks again to Supremacy World War III for sponsoring this video. Download the game for free using the link in the description and claim your $40 starter pack, including the exclusive Elite Railgun, available only for new players for the next 30 days. Now go check out the insanely crazy story of a tiny soldier, or click on this video instead.